So let's talk a little bit about a look back at the history of Optane, because I think a lot of times when we talk about new technologies, Optane truly is something that is different than has ever been done. And Intel's been investing for a very, very long time, and I'm not sure that that's always apparent. You know, we started the 3D XPoint development back in 2012. We started making production of wafers around 2015. Our first product was the Optane SSD, and those hit the market about 2017. We then followed shortly thereafter with the client SSDs. And in 2019, in June, this was a moment dear to my heart, we came to market with the persistent memory, and I was part of that launch. Also that year, the hybrid drive client memory H10. It's been a very successful product. We came out with that product. And just at the end of this last year, if you were with us at Memory and Storage Moment, we came out with we talked more about the PMem 200 series, as well as the new Alderstream P5800X product. It's stellar. And we even rolled out the Series 300 of CrowPass is coming. So while sometimes we at Intel tend to think that we've been doing this forever, if you take a step back and look at it, it really has been a very long journey. And we've done some things really well. We've done some things maybe not quite so well, and things that we've had to learn along the way. So as we talk about making this idea of a persistent, byte addressable, media into products that the market can adopt, and really changing the architecture in the data center, I'm just going to give you kind of a brief overview of where we're starting to see the real successes, and also where we're continuing to struggle, so that you guys can help offer your feedback and your understanding of how things are going. So where it's being adopted and going really, really well, we don't report our financials. So it's often hard for me to say, well, we shipped so many units and we did this, but there are certain workloads and industries where we're really starting to get very strong traction. We're thrilled with the progress that we've made. And really, databases is the core for both of these businesses. I'll show you a breakout in a little bit of a minute, but databases, especially in combination with real-time analytics, has really been a prime consumer of these technologies in both of its forms. And so we'll lay that out there. Especially on the SSD side, VMware with vSAN is shaping up to be a very large percentage of the business opportunity that we have. And the customers are using that as a storage caching tier. Within that same infrastructure, persistent memory is also used as memory extension or memory expansion, and that's really starting to take off. So a large portion of the enterprise VMware users are really starting to embrace persistent memory. The other thing we're seeing is a very strong desire across the board for infrastructure consolidation use cases, where you use the persistent memory or the storage caching tiers of Optane to do more with fewer servers, and that's been a very strong trend that we see in the market. HPC has actually been a big surprise for us. I think me as the product manager for persistent memory in the early years, I didn't think that we would see a lot of strong play in HPC because it's a very fragmented market. The software optimization required can be difficult, but I will tell you that particular market is about 400% of what we were projecting that it would be for persistent memory in particular. And so there's been really strong uptake in that. I know we talked to you last time we were here about Deos, and that's one of the examples. And then financial services is another area where we're doing really well. What I want to talk about is I think that there's a lot of skepticism in the market of, is Intel really successful? Are we really going to make it? Are they committed to the technology? And so I'll tell you some of the things that we've learned that we haven't executed as well as we wanted to, and that we're going to be working on moving forward. So I'll start with, our vision was that infrastructure as a service, that cloud service providers would be offering this everywhere. It would be ubiquitous. What we learned is that the basic architecture, being a cache architecture and sharing that DDR bandwidth, it makes it to where you don't have consistent performance. You can have really high performance, sometimes you can have lower, and that doesn't fit well in the general purpose infrastructure services. for the cloud service providers. So we've been focusing on more dedicated services and things like video recommendation engines and things like that. The other thing we've learned is that the software really, really matters. And unless we're in lockstep with our ISV partners, it's going to take a long time to get adoption. So we're putting a lot more focus on the software enabling as well as partnerships in the market. We've learned that OEMs, it's hard to sell a new technology. And so we have to help them by providing full solutions. And so we have a very, very heavy focus on proving the art of the impossible, showing what is possible. So you'll see a lot more focus on that in the upcoming years. The other long trend in the pole we're finding has been OEM quals, especially on the SSD side. They move quite slowly, as you should with a storage architecture. You have to make sure that you don't have any problems with your data. But it takes a long time. So we're putting a lot more focus on that. And then the last thing I'll just call out is that what I've realized, especially over the last 4 years, is that status quo thinking makes it very difficult for people to understand that this truly isn't just a storage device or a memory DIMM or a replacement. It's not just a cheap commodity. It's really quite different. And when you think about using Optane SSDs and Optane persistent memory as a new tier, that's when these new use cases become possible. And it's going to take years, I think, for the market to really embrace this as a new tier that is here to stay. But that's where we're spending a lot of time and focus. So the number one question I always get from the analysts and the press, and I've even seen it in the chatter on the Slack channels, is, prove to me that you're successful. You don't share your revenue, you don't share your shipments. So tell me how I know. Are your customers really adopting the technology? And it's a fair question to ask, right? I'm not complaining about that. So that's what today's theme is going to be. We're actually going to make it real by sharing real customer stories and how we're deploying. And you get to hear it from the people who work on the projects and ask questions and hear how it goes. So this is just an overall summary of where we've been seeing our successes. The Fortune 500 companies are really starting to embrace this. And while we can't publicly talk about customers unless they allow us to, over 200 of the Fortune 500 companies are engaging or deploying persistent memory.
Hey, Kristie, can you talk about volumes? Let's not talk about customers, but like chip volumes or something like that, because I think there's a challenge here that this sort of game is a volume game, and until you get to a certain level of shipments or volume, it's going to be a losing proposition.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Let me tell you this. I will commit to getting back to you with what I can share, because normally we don't. And I know right where your head is. How many petabytes are you shipping? And that is the struggle that you have as a startup. Is until you get to scale, it's hard to be cost effective. Yeah. So the scale is building. And we have some tipping points that we have now officially reached that I think is really helping us. But some of those things I can't talk about. I'll also be just flat out honest. We're not there yet. We don't have the scale yet to fully compete as a commodity memory device or a commodity, an SSD device. At the same time,
I have a question about the number you're sharing. I mean, it's incredible that it was easier looking at this slide to convert, customer and many more customer in the Fortune 500 to a new technology like persistent memory than a faster SSD. I mean, was it a different use case or, or for scenarios? I mean, the number are really weird.
I know it's counterintuitive, and in fact, I hadn't seen them side by side until we pulled this presentation together, because we used to be two different groups. The primary thing that I will say is that Optane persistent memory was designed into the platform. It's part of the Xeon platform, and all of the OEMs, all of the partners had designed it in so that it was available. It was already validated and qualified. So when I talked about long OEM quals, it was actually designed in and it was part of it. And we were able to very quickly move forward because the OEMs were in lockstep with us. But that also, it has to do with the size of the deployments. When you look at an SSD deployment, it's basically a super fast block device. And so it is a little bit easier. So you can get customers that are going to go whole hog across their whole environment with an Optane SSD. When we're looking at Optane persistent memory, they're usually looking at a narrow use case to give it a try first. It's a little bit intimidating. And so they're looking for ones where we have our key partner, our ISV partners online with us, and it's a targeted workload. So they often aren't as high a volume. So that's really how I interpret those numbers. And what's interesting to me is that we've been going in this approach of with all persistent memory, nobody buys without a proof of concept first, right? Because it's just something that isn't done. It's too scary and too risky. So what we found is by doubling down on supporting the proof of concepts and helping the customers with the optimization, we're also seeing much higher conversion rate. But I think it's because we're hand holding those, and I don't know how scalable that will be. We are seeing huge growth year over year. So that part is good. Eventually, you need to get to the point that you don't have to handhold those POCs.
I do have a question. So earlier today, we actually had a session where we're talking about storage less, as a single word and defining it. To me, coming from the HPC world, it's a server that has a few hundred terabytes of persistent memory, right? At that point, if I have servers with that amount of persistent memory, the concept of remote storage becomes less and less of an issue. So what I'm saying here is do you see Optane to be more as still as a niche player moving forward, and where performance and low latency is key, or are you going to focus on more on delivering largest amount of capacity with the same amount of performance? Because I'm more with the latter, where if I have more access to it, even if the performance doesn't increase time over time, I would be more happier with that than with a ever increasing performance, a lower latency, but where the capacities really don't increase.
Yeah, I think that's the complexity of the data center market, is that every workload or use case or segment has different preferences. Because we do have, customers where every ounce of performance really, really matters. And then there are customers where capacity really matters. So I'll say the answer is different for the different technologies. Capacity is really, really important in the storage segment. In the memory part, where the persistent memory plays, we haven't yet seen significant demand for DIMM capacities higher than the half a terabyte. Now, we know over time that's not going to be the case, but the market still isn't ready to consume that much. So it's still a rare use case that needs the 1 terabyte sticks. We've been chomping at the bit to release 1 terabyte sticks because, believe me, with this media, the density is so high, it's super easy to do it. We don't have anybody out there screaming for it yet. So please give us the feedback. If you're seeing use cases where the capacity is valuable, it would be an easy thing for us to go up on the persistent memory side. Okay,
thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I think enough about this. These slides will be made available to you, or you'll be able to watch the videos. But you can. What I've tried to do here is just break out for you where are we seeing the adoption and in which segments. And you'll hear from a few of these segments today. Don't think we need to spend a whole lot more time on marketing fluff. We'll get right down into the stories here. But hopefully you find that helpful so that you understand where we are in the journey. Okay, another question that I was asked to address by Stephen is, I know there's a lot of chatter out there about what exactly is this announcement that happened, what's included in the agreement, what's not. So I thought I would cover that. And then we'll also talk about client briefly. I'll ask Mr. Lundell to cover that. I think you guys are aware of this, but just to recap, basically Intel signed an agreement to sell the NAND memory and storage business to SK Hynix. It's going to close in 2 phases. And the first phase is for the NAND SSDs, NAND component and wafer business, as well as the Intel Dalian factory, or the fab. And that's going to be closing, we hope, later this year. That's the target. We'll have to see once we get through all the regulatory approvals. Phase 2, that's where we also transfer the NAND technology development and the component development, as well as day-to-day fab operations. And that one is scheduled much further out. I've heard 2025 is kind of the timing for that one. So that's what's included and when. Intellectual property is probably the one thing that Intel is going to keep a handle on, but the intellectual property will start transitioning at phase 2. The other thing that is really important for everyone to understand, because there's been a lot of open questions about that, is, well, what does that mean for Optane? And you're going to hear us talk about this new Intel Optane Group. Basically, what they've done is decided to double down on making sure that Optane is a full business unit. We created the new Intel Optane Group. It's going to roll up into the data center group, up through Naveen Shenoy. And if you were at Memory and Storage Moment, you saw his keynote. But we are fully intending to continue investing, developing, and scaling the Intel Optane business. We feel that Intel is uniquely positioned because we work with so many partners and we have the ecosystem reach, that in order to incubate something this disruptive, we need to stay involved and invest here. So that's the current plan. Are there any questions before I go just a little bit deeper?
So one of the questions I would have, I mean, and I'm not sure this is the right forum for that, but would it be worthwhile to have other vendors supporting your Optane storage? Well, let me say the word. Let's say there's another processor component, company out there that creates similar processors to you, but they don't have support for your device. Would that be something that would be something you would consider?
It is, and by the way, it's something we are pathfinding in every day. Yeah, don't assume that the status quo today is the status quo for the next 5 years. But we are also going to make sure that we maintain the ability to shape the future direction in the technology. So yeah, I don't have any concrete plans I can talk about, of course.
I think maybe I'll add in there just so that if you think about those two technologies, certainly our Optane SSD is one that works just on the PCI Express bus and with NVMe.
No question. I understand.
So there's no hook in there, right? You're more than welcome to use that.
Right. Anybody is able
with
to
anything.
Do it. It's
correct.
It's the PMem that I thought was more of a. It seems to be more successful as far as I can tell from a customer exposure perspective. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. I don't know how you judge success, but let's just say this: it's going to be a little bit easier to adopt the SSDs in because it's a standard block device, and so it's
maybe
very.
The PMem is just more exciting technology-wise, geek-wise, right? Because it's cool.
Yeah, we get a lot of the cool factor. I love that. And so yeah, and you can also imagine a world as we move to standard open standards like CXL, you could imagine a world where PMem would no longer necessarily have to be completely tied to the processor. So we have no concrete plans that we can really talk about, but just know that that's always an option. I don't think Intel's trying to keep it proprietary at all costs. All right. So these are just some key bullets. I borrowed this slide from one of the decks that they created, but basically Intel, the reason we're rolling up Intel Optane Group into the data center group is that it's a core platform element, and it's something that we have to stay closely tied to that platform and the processor and make sure that it works better together. Intel is continuing to invest, and we have a long-term roadmap where we have other generations in development, and all of this business will be moved to the newly formed group. All right, David Lundell, can I ask you, can you talk to this slide about the client business?
Yeah, absolutely. We thought we'd just give you guys an update on where we are in the client business because we've started seeing some headlines out there. You can see on the left, Intel kills its consumer-facing Optane products, and that is absolutely not true. Our business in the client space is alive and well and actually growing year over year. Just as a little background where the story came from. So we had some products we introduced in 2017, and actually Kristie showed those on our roadmap. And a normal product life cycle of a client product is 2 to 3 years. And so we were getting to the natural end of life of those products. And we've been working with our customer on this for quarters, but it was time to discontinue the ones that we actually sell through Amazon and other places, Newegg, so forth. So we have to make that discontinuance public because they're publicly purchased products. So anyway, so we disclosed that. Some of the press have taken this to the extreme and suggesting that we're exiting a business, and that's not true. The reality of it is we've been working with our customers over the years on where to focus our products in client. So when we started, we were focused purely on Optane SSDs, but as we worked with them, they've asked us on how we can get this technology into thin and light mobile PCs. And so we've started shifting our roadmap to focus in that area. And so we've taken the best of Intel Optane technology, which is responsiveness, performance, low latency, which has benefit to consumers. And then we paired it with our QLC NAND technology and put it into a single drive. And you can see that in the middle. As Kristie pointed out, we've been shipping the Intel Optane Memory H10 now for a couple years. And that's a combination of Optane and QLC NAND on a single 2280 M.2. And we also just announced at the Memory and Storage Moment in December that we're going to launch the next successor to that, which is the H20 in next quarter. So we have products planned beyond that. We have a complete roadmap. So we continue to invest. We continue to grow. We're partnered closely with our customers in optimizing these products for the segments they're intended. And the key part of this that the customers value is it's part of our Intel platform. Of course, we've got our core processors in the client business. There's also a new brand called Evo, which represents the mobile go-getter and talks about how we extend battery life, reduce the form factor size. And we are also part of that program as well. So Intel is continuing to invest in the client business and looking forward to it growing for our customers. So, in summary, and I think Kristie hit this on her intro slide, we're learning. We're learning in the data center segment. We're learning in the client segment. And we are, coming into our multiple years now of shipping these products, and combined with our customers and partners, we're building great things as we go forward.